Paul Ryan, Reince Priebus,
and the rest,
and Donald Trump. Behind closed doors, the Donald visits D.C.
Mr. Trump goes to Washington.
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 Oh, why didn't we think of that? Mr. Trump goes to Washington.
somebody will listen to me.
An event so big, it requires not one box, not two, not three, not four, not five. Holy sh!
The whole big political world gorged itself on a nice big juicy Trump steak out extravaganza in Washington, D.C. today. We, of course, have our own team of reporters standing by to cover all the angles of this very big story on this special report edition of With All Due Respect team coverage throughout this all-new episode. It was, quote, a great day in D.C. That's how Donald J. Trump, billionaire, described his huddle with House Speaker Paul Ryan, RNC Chairman Reince Priebus, and other Republican leaders on Capitol Hill this morning in a series of meetings. Just in case you've not been glued to the tube all day, let me give you a quick recap of all the major developments. The press got there early before Trump's big three major meetings. First, Trump met with Ryan and Priebus, followed by a gathering of other House GOP leaders. Trump also spoke with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Republicans in the upper chamber. Afterwards, Ryan and Trump released a joint statement that said in part, quote, while we were honest about our few differences, we recognize that there are also many important areas of common ground. We will be having additional discussions, but remain confident there's a great opportunity to unify our party and win this fall, and we are totally committed to working together to achieve that goal. Trump later tweeted, quote, great day in D.C. with that Speaker Ryan and Republican leadership, things working out really well, exclamation point, Trump 2016. This afternoon, Trump reportedly met with former Secretary of State James A. Baker, one of the GOP's iconic figures, and Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, who's been very anti-Trump, reportedly had a, quote, cordial phone call with Trump today. On the program here yesterday, you may recall, Graham seemed to be warming to Trump, although he did repeat today that he's still not planning to vote for either Clinton or Trump. So, Nicolle Wallace, Republican strategist of long standing, what, if anything,
currently in the witness protection program?
What, if anything, was accomplished today with Trump's visit, particularly the one with Paul Ryan?
You know, I know that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the speaker, and he's obviously a rising star in the Republican Party. He's revered by establishment figures, but also viewed as having a bright future by the grassroots of our party. But I'm more intrigued by the potential political opportunity of Donald Trump beginning to get a toehold on matters of national security with meetings like the one he had with Secretary Baker, who is revered and who really does hew closer to the Trump worldview of less is more of a realist than the idealism of George W. Bush. And I think that phone call with Lindsey Graham is very significant.
The fact that Graham took the call, they talked at length. There's no doubt that the focus on the Ryan meeting is important. We'll talk about it. But the fact that he had that meeting, I'll tell you another meeting he had that's got not that much notice. He met with Senate strategists to talk about what he could do to help them win. He met with Rob Portman, whose Ohio Senate seat is one of the biggest high stakes things on the table this year. Trump is not a known figure to most of these folks. And the fact that he sat extended meetings, by all accounts, he listened a lot in these meetings. Paul Ryan said Trump was very gracious and personable. I think he did himself a lot of good, because what these men and women in the party want, someone they can trust.
That's right. That's right. So it leads us to our next part of our conversation. Why do you think, what is the political motivation? I know you were in the room. Why is Ryan so accommodating at this moment to Trump?
You know, I think that Ryan, I'm surprised at how far he went today. I mean, he really was tried to accentuate the positive in every moment at that press conference he had in the joint statement. You know, a bunch of Republicans endorsed Trump in the last couple days. Kevin McCarthy, the number 2 Republican in the House, Greg Walden, who heads the House Campaign Committee, a bunch of committee chairs. I don't think those endorsements leave Ryan any choice. He can't be anti-Trump. Even if Mitt Romney's anti-Trump, I don't think he has a choice. He's got to move towards consolidating. And I think Ryan realizes that now Trump can win, and he wants to have Trump as a partner in governing if he ends up as a speaker working with the Republican president.
And it's so interesting to me. I mean, Trump and Ryan are as different on policy as Ryan and Hillary Clinton might be. Maybe more.
Maybe more. In some big issues, maybe more.
They're diametrically opposed on policy, on trade, on foreign policy, on entitlement reform.
Yep.
I mean, you could go on and on. But I think that when you look back, you've written great books about it. When you look back at when things get done in Washington, it's when people reach across the partisan divide. This may be the rare instance where Republicans are doing the longer grab than you'd have to do to reach across party lines.
But they do agree on some stuff, including the bare bones.
I think they're grasping at straws, Mark. We're talking about life in the Supreme Court. Those are like last-ditch
But they agree on the
efforts.
politics. They want Hillary Clinton to lose, and that is going to be the big unifying thing. All right. So both Donald Trump and Paul Ryan admit that despite the common ground they have found, they still, as Nicolle just said, have differences. So, Nicolle, you mentioned some of them. Which of the big differences that you named will matter in the context of this election? Not if Trump wins and Ryan remains Speaker, but which of those differences do you think can't be papered over in the context of the campaign?
Listen, having worked in a White House, my gut tells me foreign policy, but having covered campaigns, and you've covered more than I have, it's the economy, right? I mean, so I think that finding some economic message, some pro-growth message that doesn't make Paul Ryan cringe every time he has to talk about Donald Trump's appetite for trade wars and his protectionism and his sort of isolationism on the economic front. I think those are the differences that are so fundamental. If you go back and look at the public Paul Ryan record and the so far 9
Why couldn't Trump rewrite his tax plan?
Well, Trump can. Trump can. I mean, Paul Ryan can't.
Right.
Paul Ryan is sort of an ideological, economic, free market guy. He doesn't have a lot of room to control himself. But Trump's not wed, I don't think, to any of his policies.
I think they're going to have to just agree to disagree on immigration. On entitlement reform, I think Trump can move. If Ryan can basically convince Trump to say, we're going to preserve these programs for current beneficiaries, we'll preserve them for the next set of beneficiaries, but we're going to save them for future generations. I think Trump can make that switch. I think for Trump,
we'll be able to know more, I think, about his appetite for doing something that's very unpopular. His sort of comfort zone is doing what he thinks his economic populist base wants to hear, and they don't want to hear that they're going to get less when it comes to entitlements.
Well, but you can pretend it's not going to be less. It's just going to be different.
It's better.
The big thing to me is tax reform. That's what Ryan wants to do, and I think Trump can change his plan, and Ryan can be happy with it.
I think you're probably right about that. So, all this said, do you think that a Ryan endorsement is either imminent or probable, or?
I don't know exactly how he's going to do it. My hunch is, from talking to one of his advisors, is they don't want to make this a big deal. They don't want it to be like Paul Ryan.
Too bad, right?
Well, I mean, he can sort of ease into it, like ease it into the hot water or the cold water. I think he went a long way today. Yeah. It's inevitable now. I can't imagine that he can back down, particularly because so many of his colleagues in the House and Senate are getting on board with Trump. I think he will find a way to say, basically, I've watched Donald Trump, I've met him, I've gotten to know him, they're going to meet again, and I think I'm now comfortable with him that he'd be not just a better president than Hillary Clinton, but someone we can work with as conservatives to change the country. Trump was running against not just Washington before today, but against the Republican Party. Bill Clinton did the same thing in 1992, but after he got the nomination, he turned a little bit and ran more against both parties and the Washington culture. I think once he reaches that point, then I think Ryan will endorse him.
I think it's likely. I don't think it's imminent. I think that Ryan is such an intellectual force in the conservative movement. I think there's sort of an element of therapy on his part. I mean, you can see him hashing it out in full view of the cameras, grasping at issues like life and conservative principles, which is what we always say when we disagree with each other. But I think this is going to be harder than Ryan will make it look, and it speaks to his talent and maybe some flexibility that we didn't know he had.
Yep, I agree with all of that. All right, coming up, we'll talk about Trump's trip to Washington with some more detail. We have reporters, members of Congress, advisors, and more after these words from our sponsors. Joining us now from Capitol Hill, the Russ Rotund to the great Kelly O'Donnell, NBC News, to talk about the big Ryan-Trump meeting and Trump's trip there. Kelly, Ryan and Mitch McConnell have been studies in contrast since Trump set up the nomination. Ryan holding out, McConnell getting on board, sort of. Just talk about the personal styles and political decisions that have gone into where they are today.
Well, Mitch McConnell is the ultimate pragmatist, and he is also someone who can see around the corner politically. He can see 2 or 3 steps down the line. Paul Ryan's in a different position as really the head of the party, the chairman of the convention, much more visible in a way. Some of McConnell's strengths are really kind of backroom strengths, knowing where things are headed. So they had kind of different responsibilities and different challenges. So when you see the public reluctance of Paul Ryan, when we know of him as being this policy guy, a policy wonk, self-proclaimed, didn't even want to be speaker, embracing that position now and wanting to sort of defend conservatism of this modern time and to move it in a way that is more appealing to a broader base. Now, McConnell is playing a tactical game. He is kind of the new majority leader and does not want to see that go away with the election. They've got 24 seats on the ballot. Democrats only have 10. So he does not want to lose his majority. So the message he is sending, and he's getting some definite feedback from other Senate Republicans, is that the people have chosen Trump. And the faster those in Washington get on board with that, the better it will be. It's not as if their resistance to Trump is going to change his place as the nominee after all the talk of a convention. So McConnell, more quietly, more slowly, getting to that end point faster. And so kind of a who even noticed endorsement from McConnell, whereas there's all this pressure about will Ryan endorse and when. So it's a study in contrast. They do have different roles and different responsibilities, but different messages to the Republican Party. Certainly on the Senate side, senators want to be able to be their own people, to be defining their own race, not to be linked to Trump, but you know the Democrats, both individual campaigns and the organizations, will try to link each one of those on the ballot to Donald Trump in the ways that are most controversial. That's a challenge. Everybody gets that. But there's also a desire to make sure there's enough fundraising power with a nominee who we don't yet know. Will he work with those who are on the ballot in the fall to raise money for the party? They've got to pay for the convention this time, not federally financed. So all of those issues come to really a head today, beginning toward a new direction. McConnell giving people sort of a pass to get on board. Ryan trying to keep the soul of the new party intact, to say we want policy, we want ideas, but we're not closing the door. That's sort of my take. What a whirlwind of a day. I can't wait to exhale when it's all over and really take it all in, Mark.
Kelly, it's Nicolle Wallace. I've been watching you all day. I hope you've taken a breather. I want to know how hands-on McConnell is with the senators who really, I think, eye Trump with a lot of trepidation.
Well, they're having those conversations, and one thing McConnell does is he lets an individual senator run their race. There are some very vulnerable seats, and he knows that those senators will have to move away from Trump on key issues, will have to be voices of criticism to Trump, whether it's about the Muslim ban issue, which Trump is sort of backing away from, whether it's about his relationship to women voters and how well he's performing or not performing there. And so you will see McConnell do a couple of things. He'll use the Senate floor and the policies that may be advanced in the normal workings of Capitol Hill. Expect no dangerous votes for Republicans, no walking of the plank. He'll give them room to run their own races. And I think there's an expectation that Trump probably won't care if some of those Republican candidates distance themselves. He's been running against Washington. So I think where Paul Ryan is looking for unity, and we're certainly hearing from members of the Republican conference that they don't want to be in a rock and a hard place between their speaker and their party nominee, when many voters at home, not all, but many voters at home, were sending a signal about Trump. We're also hearing that there are some members of the Senate who could kind of feel the changes in the electorate over a number of years now, and that has taken this party to Trump, for good or bad or the unknown. And so expect McConnell to want to protect that majority first and foremost. And of course, he wants to see a Republican president, but his job is to protect that majority.
Kelly O'Donnell on Capitol Hill. Kelly, thank you very much. I will say this meeting's coming with some state polls and national polls showing Trump in position to win. Made a big difference in the mood out there. Republicans are happy to see someone coming who could help them actually take back the White House. Coming up, two Republican congressmen talk about Trump's D.C. trip and what it means for party unification efforts. We'll have them here when we come back. Joining us now to talk more about Donald Trump's speed dating session on Capitol Hill today, two Republican members of the House, Raul Labrador of Idaho, who has said Trump will be the nominee but has not endorsed him yet, and Tom Marino of Pennsylvania, who has early on endorsed the presumptive Republican nominee. They both join us from the Cannon Rotunda on Capitol Hill. Gentlemen, welcome. Let me start with you, Congressman Marino. Tell me what you think Donald Trump accomplished today with the meetings that he held on the Hill.
I think Donald and both Paul and Ryan accomplished a great deal today just for the sake of getting together and not so much airing out differences, because I think they came to realize that they have a great deal in common.
Okay. Congressman Labrador, is there something that could happen that would make you all of a sudden get wildly enthusiastic about Donald Trump as your nominee? And if so, what is that?
Well, I want to clarify. I'm supporting Donald Trump because he's the nominee of the party. I always said that I was going to support anybody who was the nominee. I would have to sit down and talk with him and really understand some of the things that he has been saying. He has been sort of attacking some of the things that conservatives believe in. And I want to know exactly what he believes, because I'm not sure that the press has gotten everything right. So I need to get to know him. I need to be excited about what he's doing. But for now, I think he's 100% better than Hillary Clinton. I have no problem supporting him in the presidential race.
Congressman Labrador, it's Nicolle Wallace. Do you worry about where the polls are for Donald Trump with women? As you know, winning a White House requires the GOP nominee to narrow, not to close or overcome the Democrat, but certainly to narrow the gender gap. Are you worried about any of those comments?
You know, I worry a little. Obviously, I worry about the comments and I worry about the gap. But if you look at the polls with, vis-a-vis Donald Trump, he's been a master of actually doing better than the polls say. And if you look at the polls from maybe a year ago, nobody suspected that he was going to be the nominee. No one suspected he was going to win women in the Republican Party. And he did pretty well with women in the Republican Party. He did pretty well with independent women. So I think he's going to narrow that gap. I think he's going to do better. I think he needs to explain better to the American people what his positions are, because he's going to have $500 billion worth of money being used against him. And he really needs to get his house in order and figure out how exactly he's going to explain some of those positions that he has taken.
Congressman Marino, as someone who was early on in this, I'm wondering how much in the last week or so, and even today, your colleagues are coming up to you, asking you about Donald Trump, asking you to help set up meetings with Donald Trump or his senior staff. How much has the buzz and the excitement built just in this last week?
It has increased substantially. I have more and more individuals coming up saying, what can I do? How can I get involved? I love the idea that Paul and Donald got together. I tell them, I speak with Paul on a regular basis and Donald. There'll be more of these meetings, like putting the planks together to put our platform together. And I just think this is going to be a dynamic combination with a businessman as president, the finesse and the experience that Paul has on the Hill and the numbers game. And these two, along with Republican House and a Republican Senate, can make America great again.
To use a phrase. Congressman Labrador, in a normal cycle at this point, all the Republican members of the House would be publicly wildly enthusiastic about the nominee. Now we have gradations going from people saying they won't vote for Donald Trump to people like Congressman Marino saying wildly enthusiastic about it. Will that be true by the time we get to Cleveland, or do you think by the time we get to Cleveland, it'll be a largely united party, everybody enthusiastic?
I think it will be pretty united by the time we get to Cleveland. I think there's really just one common enemy, and that's Hillary Clinton. I know who Hillary Clinton's going to pick, the type of people she's going to pick as her vice president. I know the kind of people that she's going to pick as her judicial nominees. I know the kind of people that she's going to pick for her administration. All those people are different than what I want for America, what I want for the future of America. So I think we will come behind, at least we will get excited about never Hillary, and I think little by little we will get more excited about Donald Trump. I think what he did today, he actually came to Congress, he talked to the Speaker, he talked to the leadership, and I think he was able to go a long way to unify the party. But I think it really is up to both Donald Trump and Paul Ryan to unify the party, and I think we can do that. I think if you look at previous elections, you had some trepidation about John McCain, you had some trepidation about Mitt Romney. This always happens after a bruising primary, and I think after the bruising primary, I think we're going to be able to come together and actually win this time.
Congressman Marino, is there anything about the pre-Trump Republican Party that you would miss, such as our party standing for free and fair trade, such as our party standing for, a more interventionist foreign policy? I mean, are there any things that we've lost with Donald Trump as our party standard bearer?
No, quite the opposite. I think we've gained things. I know in speaking to Paul, and same with we conservatives in the House, that we want to make sure that the Article 1 issue is, in fact, Congress's authority and not the president. And my discussions with Donald, he has no problem with that, and that we are pro-life, and Donald is pro-life. On the other hand, Paul has shared with me that the people have overwhelmingly voted to have Donald Trump as their candidate, and two of the issues, among others, that he's concerned with are trade and border security. And Paul's made it very clear that Donald will be the nominee because of those two issues. And they will get together, we will get together as a party to come up with solutions. So just about everybody's on board. I'm sure there'll be one or two
can I just challenge you? I mean,
that still are suffering.
I'm sorry, the Republican Party certainly stood for more issues than just life and the Constitution. We used to stand for free and fair trade around the world. Republicans are Obama's greatest allies in trying to get the current trade deal. I mean, are there any policies that the Republican Party has been... Go ahead.
Let me address that, because it's not fair trade. It's not fair trade. I want fair trade, not free trade. We're always taking the short end of the stick here. These other countries need us more than we need them. They're manipulating their currency. They're subsidizing their manufacturing. They're flooding the market. And Donald Trump and Paul Ryan and the Republicans in the House and Senate, we have to make changes, meaning that lower the taxes for middle-class people, lower the corporate tax so it puts industry on a level playing field that will bring industry back to this country so we can manufacture steel and products that we can not only sell in America, quality products that will create high-paying jobs, but around the world as well.
Gentlemen, we got less than a minute, so I've been to ask your indulgence for a rapid round. Start with Congressman Labrador. Just one-word answers on these. Congressman, who's the favorite to win the White House, Clinton or Trump? Who's the favorite?
I think Trump will win overwhelmingly.
Okay. Congressman Marino, who's the favorite, Trump or Clinton? One word.
Trump.
Trump landslide, you both say. Okay. Congressman Marino, who should Donald Trump pick as his running mate? One word.
I can't do it in one word because there are many individuals, males and females, that he has a
Give me two names of people you'd be delighted with.
I said one of the female governors would be a great asset to the ticket.
Congressman Labrador, who would you be delighted with if he picked him?
I think Ted Cruz would be wonderful, and I think Governor Perry would be wonderful as well.
Okay, great. Congressman and Congressman, thank you both for joining us. One last thing, getting a lot of talk on Capitol Hill today. A federal judge in Washington has struck down part of the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, concluding that the president overstepped by funding insurance subsidies without congressional approval. The case will be appealed. Up next, Trump advisor and a Ryan advisor will be here on set to talk about the big meetings in Washington today after this quick break.
To what extent, based on his past statements and what he said today, do you think he's committed to reducing, as you are, the scope and size of government? And what do you think of his personality?
His personality, I thought he's very good personality. He's a very warm and genuine person. There are just things that we really believe in as conservatives. We believe in limited government. We believe in the Constitution. We believe in the proper role of the differences in the separation of powers. We believe in things like life. So I think we're off to an encouraging start. It is important that we get ourselves to full strength so that we can win in the fall, because the stakes could not be higher. But it takes more than 45 minutes, Mark.
That was House Speaker Paul Ryan at his Capitol Hill press conference this morning, answering a question I asked about his meeting with Donald Trump. Here now in studio, two guys with winning personalities, Trump campaign senior advisor Barry Bennett and Dan Senor, a longtime friend and informal advisor to the Speaker. Gentlemen, welcome. Barry, seemed, as best I could tell, a series of successful meetings today. Yeah. What do you know about the meeting with Secretary of State Baker? What was the purpose of that?
I don't know a bunch about it, but I know that they were talking about transition and transition teams and all that kind of stuff, and obviously Mr. Baker's.
So what would you say, besides the fact that everybody's talked it up, what would you say concrete was accomplished today?
I think that a lot of people got to meet Donald Trump for the first time, frankly. And what they'll find is that he has a very engaging, big personality. So some of their preconceived notions start to erode away.
Anything happened today that causes you to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to stand with the Bushes and Mitt Romney, but
no.
Why not?
Because, first of all, there were 3 outcomes that could have occurred today. Outcome 1 would have been it was such a great meeting that Paul Ryan would have come out and effectively endorsed Donald Trump. Outcome 2 would have been him basically say there's no way in hell I'm endorsing Donald Trump. And outcome number 3 is what occurred, which is we had a constructive discussion. We had a good discussion. We've got to keep a channel of communication open. Effectively, Donald Trump is on trial, and I'm going to work with him and see if I can get to endorsing him. And for the most senior elected Republican in the country to come out of a meeting with the presumptive Republican nominee after the guy has it locked up and say, I'm still not ready to endorse. You don't figure that out in 45 minutes, but we're going to work together, is not inconsequential.
But what is the implication of it if he's going to eventually endorse?
I don't know if he's going to eventually endorse. I think he probably will endorse, but he wants to create some space here to see if he and Trump can work together and whether or not he can get Trump educated to the point that he feels comfortable that, Trump is actually a conservative. I don't believe he is. I don't think a lot of the people, some of whom are even supporting him, believe he is. But I think what would have been dangerous for Paul is that he'd come out and endorse them either last week or this week, and then have Trump quickly revert back to his schoolyard antics or to another, revision to one of his positions, whether it's on tax reform, entitlement reform, foreign policy, any one of these issues that he just goes back and forth. His assurances are meaningless, and then have Paul out there sort of completely embarrassed because he's endorsed this guy who's bouncing around.
Right. I want to just ask one more question, which is, we'll pretend you're not here for a second. You were a Trump skeptic when you were working for Ben Carson, and you've been on board and enthusiastic now. Yeah. When you look at this, what's the psychological profile you see? Which stage is Dan in?
He's nearing the final stage.
Yeah.
Do you predict that Dan will be a Trump endorser by Cleveland?
Well, I mean, I've been in Dan's shoes, right? When John McCain was running, I was a never McCain. There's no way, no how. I'm not a single issue voter, but I vote Republican. But God, that guy's never a Republican, and I'm not voting for him. I wrote him a check and I voted for him. I think in comes.
McCain? You're comparing Trump to McCain?
No, I'm comparing that we were both walking in the same shoes, that we didn't like our nominee, but eventually we came around.
I get it, but there's not a single issue. Hold on, if you call yourself a conservative, Barry, there's not a single issue. Hold on. There's not a single issue that Donald Trump has embraced that, as a self-respecting conservative, can say, I have confidence that he actually believes that there are real principles and convictions that I can have confidence in, and that he will govern with.
That is your opinion.
Tell me one issue.
Can I jump in? So you and I work for a lot of the same people. We champion the same policies on behalf of those people, and I believe that the people we work for believe them at the time. Where did we lose the base of our party?
Look,
because they voted for Donald Trump, who doesn't believe any of the things.
Look, there's a complete crack-up going on in our economy, in our electorate, in the electorates and economies across Western Europe and the United States. Every Western democracy is experiencing this intense socioeconomic stratification that is manifesting. You see it in the Brexit debate in the UK. You see it in the rise of Marine Le Pen in France. You see it in the presidents are being elected in Austria. I mean, you just go down the list. Poland, Hungary. I mean, this transcends the Republican Party. Look what's happening with Bernie Sanders. It transcends sovereign boundaries. It's happening all over the place. So, we are experiencing the symptoms of an electorate across the board that just wants to blow the system up. I respect that. So I do think there's a lot to learn from this process over the last few months, that we have, to Nicole's point, lost some of our party, as the Democrats have. The idea that the vessel for that outrage, that vessel for that frustration, that vessel for that loss, to repair it all should be a guy who doesn't believe in anything. I really don't believe he believes in anything.
What is the cost?
I get that you don't believe in it.
What is the cost, if any, but there's got to be some, to the Trump campaign to not have Paul Ryan right now, to not have Dan Senor, to not have the Bushes, to not have Mitt Romney? Is there a cost?
Well, if you look at the last 3 national polls, frankly, not much. 42, 41, 43, 42. The Republicans are coming home. Now, it should not be surprising to anyone that Washington is the last place to understand that.
Okay, hold
after
on.
what we just went through.
Well, the Bushes don't live in Washington, neither does Mitt
Well,
Romney.
but I mean, the establishment is the last place where that's going to happen.
So
but I mean,
I think his supporters actually view going to Washington and trying to make up the establishment as a potential landmine for Trump.
I would agree that it's not entirely positive.
Yeah, look, in 2008, after McCain had the nomination locked up, you mentioned McCain. According to national polls, he was 7 to 10 points running ahead of Obama because Obama was still in the middle of a primary. You may recall McCain didn't win the race. So I think taking a snapshot of these polls and kind of over-interpreting them is a mistake. But let me ask you this question.
We're 6 or 7 points ahead where Romney was.
If Trump came out today and said, I'm for expanding Obamacare, not shrinking it, not constraining it, I'm for expanding Obamacare. So to basically take the position that Hillary Clinton has, Obamacare plus. If Trump did that, would you be okay with that?
No.
No. So how do you reconcile his complete flip on his tax reform plan, or the fact that he says that we're not going to do medical reform?
Because I don't believe it's a complete flip.
You don't?
No, I mean,
so he literally said that a few days ago. He says that was just something introduced. It's a starting point, but
what he said was, you're not listening. All you hear is what you want to hear.
No,
what he said was, I have to negotiate with Congress.
Right.
As you and I both know, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get up with everything you want.
Right. So he said he was okay with raising taxes.
No, that's not what he said. He said that you're not going to get the tax cut that I want if you have to go through Congress to get it.
What about entitlement reform? When he said that, you know what, I don't think we should deal with the national debt issue, with the fact that the country's on the cusp of going insolvent. I don't want to deal with entitlements.
I don't want to waste a lot of my time to convince you because I'm never going to.
No, but you should address these issues if you're a Republican.
I am.
Okay.
All he wants to do is make sure nobody gets hurt.
Okay.
And we can do that.
Okay.
We can do that.
That's not what he has said. He has said that he's not for these reforms.
I'm telling you what he wants to do. Listen.
So can I ask you a question? Is what he has said publicly different from what you think he wants to really do?
No, but I think when you interpret everything he says word for word and then you attach a meaning to it.
I do.
And what I'm telling you is what he doesn't want to do is hurt seniors.
I understand.
He's not going to do that.
Okay, because when politicians run for office, their words matter.
Yeah.
He has uttered a lot of words. You're asking me to sort of discard his words.
I'm not asking you to do anything.
All right, hold on. Let me say something. We understand. You've been here before to talk about your reservations. What are your feelings just as an analyst now about whether Trump has a good chance to win this election?
Look, politics is about probabilities. So you just have to, apply a probability. So do I think Trump has a 30% chance, a 40% chance of winning? Sure. Do I think he's above 50% chance? No. As an analyst, I'd say, in most races, you'd say, he's below 50%, he's 30%, he's 40%. It doesn't matter. He doesn't have a shot. I think the idea of someone like Donald Trump being commander-in-chief and having the potential to wreak havoc on the country and the world that I think he has the potential to do, and the message it would send to the world, suddenly that 30% scares me. I think, wow, 30%, that's actually high for a guy like Donald Trump.
What if he picked as his running mate someone who is a respected national security figure? Would that reassure you in any way?
My impression of watching Donald Trump, I'm not as a close advisor, but I'm an observer, is people and positions and agendas are pieces on a chessboard for him.
What if Bob Gates?
He picks them up and he drops them, and so he embraces someone because he needs them. I mean, look at the way he's treated Chris Christie. Just that alone over the last 8 weeks is quite stunning. So whether it's issues or people, he picks them up and drops them. At the end of the day, he's the commander-in-chief. Right. He has to, he could be the commander-in-chief. He's a candidate to be commander-in-chief. He has to reassure voters, the country, that he has the chops, the credentials, the judgment, the temperament to be commander-in-chief. So I don't believe a running mate
So Bob Gates as running mate doesn't change your view at all?
No. I take Donald Trump at his word.
I don't believe you.
Can I ask you a question?
With all due respect, if Bob Gates was running mate, it had to affect your view of Trump's seriousness.
I don't think Bob Gates will be his running mate.
Yeah,
it's a hypothetical. Very nice things about Hillary Clinton. But I want to ask you both this question. Was there any part of Paul Ryan that was dying on the inside / crying on the inside? And was there any part of Donald Trump that was dying on the inside and having to sort of maybe kowtow to these people that he's had so much success really lampooning for the last 9 months? Or was there any part of either of these men that you both know that was dying on the inside today?
I don't think so.
I think this has been, Paul Ryan's a political leader of ideas. He's been involved with the ideas debate for a long time. And I think watching the conservative movement fold, or parts of the conservative movement fold to this guy who's just using it, I think is difficult. He's also the leader of a party, and he's trying to strike this balance, but it's not an easy process.
I agree with him.
Donald Trump on the stump over the last couple of weeks has used Paul Ryan's name as a laugh line at his events. Will he keep doing that? Or after today, no more?
Well, I mean, he's running against Washington, so I mean, I wouldn't expect him to suddenly it turns out I like Washington. K Street's great. He's not going to do that.
Well, but will he lampoon a guy he just hung out with?
I don't think so. I don't think
so. That ends.
On him.
That ends.
But I mean, there are all these brand new conservatives that I haven't seen at any of the meetings for decades, who are very concerned about the conservative legacy. It's laughable.
So I agree with you about that, by the way. I agree that it's laughable that all these that I think it's a fair critique that Washington Republicans have not been serious about developing a real conservative governing agenda. We can agree with that. The idea that Donald Trump is the antidote to that, who's never been embraced or engaged in or advocated for a conservative idea in his life?
Let me tell you something. Policies are important. How we talk about them, they're even far more important.
Yeah.
And that's where we really have failed. Okay? The reason that we get 45% in a presidential race is because nobody thinks we even care, let alone listen.
All right, guys.
Donald Trump's changing that.
I want you to go back to the green room, have malteds, and talk more about this, but we got to go.
I want to come with you.
Barry and Dan, thank you guys both. Great discussion. When we come back, our rapid-fire rendition of Mr. Trump, goes to Washington. And if you're in Washington, you can listen to this program on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back. It was a really big day in the nation's capital. If you're just joining us, here's what happened with Donald Trump in the Beltway.
Trump, Ryan, meetings. Here's what happened.
It's not your average meet and greet.
5 a.m., Capitol Hill.
Donald Trump will kick off his day here in D.C. about 4 hours from now.
8:24, wheels down.
Trump Force One.
8:47, RNC headquarters.
There's Donald Trump.
Meeting number 1 begins. Inside, Trump, Ryan, Priebus.
Ryan Priebus is kind of the couples therapist.
Outside, circus.
There's some bagpipers playing.
Next meeting, House leadership.
So we do have one update now from meeting number 1. Now that meeting number 2 is underway, still anticipating meeting number 3 next hour. Ryan Priebus, chair of the RNC, says the first meeting was, in his words, great.
10:11, Priebus tweets.
The meeting was great.
Priebus does interviews.
Do you feel like a couples therapist?
Priebus stays on message.
It was a great meeting. It was a great first step. It was great.
11 a.m., Trump arrives for Senate meeting.
He met with all these senators.
11:04, Trump, Ryan joint statement.
It was a very positive step toward unification.
11:32, Ryan takes the podium, ready to address the day's big news.
We will take all of these bills we are passing out of the House and go to a conference.
No, the other news.
I think we had a very encouraging meeting.
Asked to elaborate.
Very encouraged with this meeting. Very encouraged.
Reporters get the message.
It's encouraging today.
Their encouraging meeting.
This was an encouraging step.
No endorsement. 1 p.m. More meetings for Trump.
He's now going to Jones Day, one of the most prestigious law firms in Washington, full of lobbyists, for another meeting.
2:12, Trump tweets.
Things working out really well.
2:31, wheels up.
Got a lot of work done in a pretty short period of time. Face to face, it's harder to attack people if you sit face to face with them, right?
Maybe, but Donald Trump is, a guy that's breaking all convention. I think that what's interesting about today is I'm not sure this had anything to do with what his supporters wanted him to do. I reached out to a few of the Trump supporters who are in my personal orbit, and they were appalled that he was going to try to kind of, in their words, suck up to people who've disparaged him and disrespected what he's done. And I think that what Trump probably wanted most today was respect and some sort of acclaim for what is undeniably a massive political accomplishment. I'm not sure he got that. I mean, I think what Dan Senor just expressed really is the rage and the grief and the exasperation of the establishment. And Paul Ryan is very much a part of that.
Yeah, I miscalculated. I didn't think he'd get nearly as much as he got today. He got a lot. It's a very successful day. Even, you're right, he'll alienate some people because of it, but that's the balancing act any outsider has to engage in. All right, coming up, a man who has actually seen Donald J. Trump's tax returns. We'll be right back. Joining us now, Tim O'Brien of Bloomberg View. He wrote the book, Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald. And in a Bloomberg View column today, he says he once saw Donald Trump's federal tax returns about a decade ago as part of a lawsuit in which Trump sued him for libel. Now, Tim says the nation needs to see what he saw. and he's here to tell us why. Tim, thanks for coming.
It's good to be here,
So
Mark.
you're not at liberty to say what you saw in the returns, but explain just kind of theoretically, big picture, what are the kinds of things you think the country would learn if they saw Donald Trump's returns?
Well, I broke it up in the column into 4 categories. I think one easy one is income. We'll just see whether or not the money he actually earns from his businesses comports with the statements he's made publicly about it. It doesn't get to his net worth. People are mistaken when they talk about that. But it does give you a reflection of some of the foundations of his wealth, as well as the scope of his business operations. He's made, I think, a point in this campaign of saying that U.S. businesses are mistaken for operating their corporations overseas, and that comes at the expense of the American worker. We know that Trump sources some of the things for his businesses overseas. Does he have investments of his own overseas? That would come out in both the personal and the corporate tax returns that he would turn over. I think his charitable contributions are a big area of interest. He's made things like his support for war veterans a focus of many of his campaign appearances, but there doesn't appear to be any really credible evidence anywhere that he's been a generous donor to veterans, despite saying so. And then I think, lastly and really importantly, is he's running for the most important office in the land. And I think it's important for anyone on any side of the aisle who occupies that office to demonstrate to voters what the possible financial or business influences are that might come to bear on them when they're sitting in the White House.
And so who's partnered with or invested with or made money from.
Yeah, correct. I think all of that's important.
Tim, Mitt Romney and Mark Halperin agree with you on the public interest in seeing this. I'm not so sure that I do, but I wonder which you think is...
Why don't you? I'm curious.
Well, I just don't think... I think we're in a political climate where Donald Trump is doing what the market requires him to do, and the marketplace of voters they're not clamoring to have the same sort of transparency of Donald Trump that they are from anyone else. They've accepted that his political brand is of an outsider, and they're not demanding the normal things that they demand from a candidate. So I actually don't think there will be the kind of pressure that there would have been on a Mitt Romney or Clinton. But I wonder if you think that not turning over the tax return is potentially more damaging to him, or because you've seen what is in it, if you think the return itself is more damaging to him.
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I think with Trump, we've seen in his candidacy a guy who basically nothing has really clung to him, right? Going back a year now, from statements he's made about people running against him to policy statements to a number of falsehoods about his own business record. He's sort of, at least in the primary season, moved past that with some ease. So whether or not the release of his tax returns is going to matter to the primary voters who supported him, I'd speculate not. I think what hasn't been tested, though, is what does that support look like in a general election? We're going to see that next. And I think some of these issues that didn't cling to him in primary season are going to be much more thorny for him in the general election. And there's this big body of middle American voters who I think are going to want more answers than maybe the primary voters did.
Okay. Tim O'Brien, man who's seen, thank you. Up next, what Donald Trump has just said about his big day in Washington, right after this. One last bit of news for you. Donald Trump did an interview with Fox's Sean Hannity about his meetings today with Paul Ryan and others. Trump said, quote, "I think we agree on a lot of different items, and we're getting there." There's more about what Trump did and said today at our story at BloombergPolitics.com right now. So I'll say again, I did not expect this day to be as successful. I hear you about backlash from some of his supporters. I heard Dan Senor about how Ryan didn't go all the way there, but I think he leaves with personal ties to a lot of people. And as you pointed out, meeting with James A. Baker is going to send a signal to a lot of people. Barry Bennett said it was about transition. I think it could be about more.
Yeah, and I think we keep watching the Ryan dynamic, but I think the thing that has real political consequences is, like we said at the beginning of the show, whether Trump can sort of get his legs under him on serious questions of national security. I think the biggest group of voters that he needs to win over are women, married women, independent women. The biggest concern they have about him is that he seems to shoot from the hip on matters of national security, and that frightens some of them. So I think he has the most to gain from the conversations with Graham and Baker.
If he reins in his rhetoric, if he can convince his Republicans he can win and raise the money, and he can keep his outsider edge while still making personal ties, I think that makes him a much more potent general election candidate than the Democrats seem to think he is.
And Republicans have gone from denial, grief, acceptance to actually talking privately about how he could likely win.
Except maybe Dan Sr.
Except Dan, poor Dan. I'm going to give him a number
He's the Japanese soldier on one of those islands holding out. All right, coming up next on Bloomberg West, the Winklevoss twins. Yes, the Winklevoss twins. Our thanks to Nicolle Wallace for sitting in for John. Until tomorrow, we'll be right back here, same bad time, same bad channel. Sayonara.